All right, welcome. This is the 8th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee's Voter and Candidate Education and Outreach Subcommittee. Today is Thursday, June 27th, and we will be here from 3:30 till 5 o'clock. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our co-chairs, Bill and Jane, will facilitate today's meeting. Next slide, please. Just going to take a moment to go over some Zoom logistics. This meeting is being recorded for later viewing, and it's being live streamed on YouTube. A copy of the recording will be available under past meetings and events on the Transitions website. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning available. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. For committee members, please take this moment to change your chat settings to everyone so that folks in attendance can view the chat. And please remember that the chat is part of the public meeting record. For community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available. People can submit questions or comments through that function. We don't always live answer questions, but we read them and they also become part of the public meeting record. At today's meeting, we're not taking verbal public comment, but folks can submit public comment at any time through the Transitions website by calling 311 or by emailing us at transition@portlandoregon.gov. And with that, we'll go to the next slide and I'll turn it over to Jane to introduce today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and welcome everyone. Thank you for giving an hour and a half of your afternoon and evening today. So kind of you to do that. And here in front of us, we've got our meeting agenda. We're going to start out with some subcommittee business. We've got a couple of meeting summaries to approve. And we, as always, we review our working agreements. We're going to talk a little bit about broad voter education, see how that's coming along, and then segue into those harder voters. How do we connect with them? Then round about 4:20, we're going to talk about candidate education. And then we've got an opportunity to talk about what's going on this summer where GTAC can play a part in giving presentations and doing tables at events and all kinds of exciting places. We will, as we always do, talk a little bit about what we are hearing from the community about ranked choice voting, because it is helpful to ourselves and also to city staff. And before we adjourn our meeting, as always, we'll talk about what is it looking like out there for the next few weeks for upcoming meetings. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. Hello, next slide, please. Thank you. There we go. Zach's unable to attend today. Otherwise, we expect a full house. First of all, what we do need to do is to approve the 4/2/24 meeting summary. And before we do that, I hope everyone has had a chance to take a look at them. And does anyone have any revisions, changes, questions about the April 2nd meeting summary? Just let me scroll down and see if I can see anybody frowning. No one's frowning. No one's waving. I like that. So I'd like to ask for a motion and a second. Would somebody please like to propose a motion to approve these meeting notes?
Terry, I'll move to approve it.
Thank you. Terry Harris has voted to approve, and may I have a second, please?
I second. This is Juanita.
Oh, Juanita, hello. Great.
Hello.
Thank you, Juanita. Okay, so now we've done one set of meeting notes. Let's go to the meeting summary of 5/28. Hope we all put our eyeballs on it. Anybody got any changes or questions about those meeting notes? Sounds like this is a good one. It's a snoozer. So we need to have someone raise their hand and agree to approve to a motion to approve, please.
Motion to approve.
Oh, Terry again. Thanks, Terry. and someone to second.
Bill was pleased to second.
Well, William Kinsey, thank you so very much. Will second those. So that is great. So we did that. So now we're just going to take a look at the usual working agreement and remind ourselves that we're going to behave. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals and offer constructive suggestions. No egg throwing or tomato throwing. Approach different opinions with curiosity, seek to understand what people are thinking and saying. Keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of your work. Arrive on time and prepared. Well, look at us. Let the group know if you're unable to attend. Thank you, Zach. And Bill and I, if it gets too harried, will have a breather. Oh, maybe ask you to have a breather too. Keep multitasking to a minimum unless you like to knit to help you concentrate. That's okay. Keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. Utilize co-chairs to know additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing. Sometimes in these meetings, we all have great ideas. Thank you for emailing Julia, Bill, and myself. And we will make sure that they get on a future agenda. Next slide. Oh, here we go. Honor the decisions of the group. Contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. Step up, talk, step back, shut up. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. Embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other good feedback. And Bill and I will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. And remember to use I statements. Thank you. Next slide, please. Is this Bill or is this me?
I think it is you, Jane, but if you'd like, I'd be happy to.
Well, you know, in advance of, oh, here we are. Here it is. I put it on two sides. Okay, so at our last meeting, city staff asked members to pay attention to June to the launch of the city's paid media campaign. And before we hear from members about what they've noticed or didn't notice about the campaign, let's ask James to give us a brief update on the ballot mailer. Then he'll pass it along to Francisca to provide an update of the campaign. So this is really, really exciting because I was fortunate to see a big spread in the Oregonian and I got all excited. My household thinks I'm totally nuts. Okay, so take it away, James. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. So excitingly, we just got the mailer back, the draft of it, the first draft of it from our designer yesterday. So that means it didn't make it into the materials for you all, obviously, because it wasn't ready last week. But if Julia, if you want to, if you give me the ability to share my screen, I could share the my screen and show you the first.
Yeah, you should be able to.
Great, perfect. Okay. All right, if everybody can see this now. So imagine, first of all, just to put this in context, this is going to be the mailer that we will be sending out to every household that resides in Portland. So it'll go not just to voters, but to every household in Portland. Our intention is to send it out around the last week of September, which is roughly 2 weeks prior, 2 to 3 weeks before the ballot arrives. So that's the timeline to keep in context when we're thinking about this mailer. And really, you've probably all gotten mailers in your home. So think about the sense of, you get something in the mail, you have maybe 5 to 10 seconds to capture somebody's attention. And we really are trying to keep that in context to design something that will let them know immediately what it is they're looking at and draw them in, and then send them to where they need to get more information. This keeps with our bite snack meal model of voter education. The one other thing to keep in context is we are also going to be doing a ballot insert, which will be a similar piece of content, but will arrive inside of your actual ballot package itself. Obviously, that will only go to voters because only you have to be a registered voter to receive a ballot. So these will be similar content, but there will be a little bit of a difference. And I'll talk at the end about what we're kind of looking for as feedback from you as far as that's concerned. So this is a first look. We just got it back. We're going to have a little bit of time to pass it around to you, to our other partners, to the transition team, the county, and the auditor's office, all to sort of give our own feedback to the designer. It'll then go back to the designer to sort of make some changes. This is meant to be an 11x6 postcard, so it fills your screen, and you kind of think of it as a full page, but it is an 11x6 postcard, so it's not quite as large. And other than that, it sort of follows our fact sheet as far as the information that we included. That was one of the things we gave to the designers. So on the front here, we have a get ready to rank like we normally do, obviously the typical postcard information. And then we put the map right on the front. We think that it draw, we got to let people know about districts, and also it's a visual that can kind of draw people in right away. And then so alongside that, we have the information about the district. And then on the back side, we have our sample ballot, and then some information about sort of filling in how to fill in the ballot briefly underneath it, and then some sort of tabulation information about both single winner and multi-winner. And then down at the bottom is all of our where to go for more information. As I said, you're the first ones seeing this. Our partners haven't even seen this yet. It just came back. So don't worry too much about every piece. I just wanted you to get a first look. This will come in your follow-up packet for information. And then for feedback, of course, we're looking for general, if you see errors, we haven't even put our comments into here yet. So we know there will be some corrections already. So if you see things, don't worry, we haven't missed anything. We're going to correct it. But we want anything that you feel is an error, obviously stuff like that. Also, in addition, I mentioned the ballot insert. We really would like some feedback on what you think should be the difference between this and the ballot insert. So in the ballot insert, you already have your ballot in front of you. So it really should be something that partners with the actual ballot itself. So, perhaps that means it doesn't make sense to have a sample ballot. Maybe we can save that room and put something else in. You're going to have your ballot. It'll tell you, it'll have the district information on it. You don't need to go and look it up. It'll have it right there. So perhaps we don't need the district map. But maybe we do want some of this information. So be thinking of it in that context of what you think here would work to share content, and what you think doesn't work, and what you think might need to be in addition to that. So that's that piece. I'll keep sharing for a second while we do question. If there's any specific questions, if they're really detailed, save it for the comments and the feedback when you get the piece, because obviously, like we're only taking a first look at this as well. So don't worry too much about getting too into the weeds, but I'd love to hear any initial thoughts or concerns if anybody has them.
James, if I could ask a question, with regard to when we provide feedback, do you have a rough estimate as when we expect you to ask us for feedback? And then what would the window be? Do we have a day? Do we have a week?
Yeah, so we'll send this out to you right after the meeting. Julia might be better to answer the question whenever you normally would get your stuff. So I don't know if that's tomorrow or whenever you get your follow-up information. You'll certainly get it in the next several days, and then 2 weeks from that time, we'd love to be able to get that feedback back. We'll give you a date there'll be a specific date when you get it, but it'll be roughly 2 weeks. We got to get a quick turnaround because we've got a timeline of the redesign and getting it to P&D to get printed and all of that stuff. So we're on a pretty strict timeline, but we built in some time to review here and get feedback from all of our partners. So yeah, great question.
Yeah, thank you, James. 2 weeks is longer than I expected, but that's good. Great.
Fred?
Yes, I did it by chat. I don't see what utility calling it a City of Portland District Plan map. Using the word plan does. I think just a district map is pretty straightforward. Plan doesn't mean anything there, and
Yep.
people might want to impute meaning to it.
Yeah, it's something I also felt similarly. It's probably superfluous language in there that doesn't mean anything. It comes out of the charter because technically it's a district plan, and this is the map for the district plan, so it's like charter language. But I agree, it's overly detailed. We don't need that word in there. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Can I
It
jump
doesn't tell
in
the
real
voter.
quick? That file wasn't made by us, so I'll ask if Ryan can change it. But we've come across that issue before too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the charter revision's over. The districts have been set by plan. Now let's just show people the map and tell them what district they're in. You know, make it much simpler. We got to keep everything as simple as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And in some content, we don't even the map doesn't even have a title. We just the header on that section kind of explains it. So we'll figure it out. But that's a great point. Stuff like that definitely want in your written feedback. Terry?
Yeah, if you can scroll to that part right there. And I wouldn't mention this otherwise, but it comes up frequently. The fill-in one rank per candidate isn't quite true. You know, it's up to 6. And I think in this educational stage, and probably especially in the ballot insert stage, people will think, oh wait, what about number 7? Where's that bubble? So I'd fix that one, but I'll go through it with a fine-tooth comb over the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, appreciate that, Terry. Yeah, there's a line we have that's sort of a proactive, don't do more than 1 per column in a row. And I think that got just translated into trying to design and move stuff around. It got translated into separating them out. But obviously, once you separate them out, you lose the meaning of what it is. But yeah, that's a great point. Yep, thanks. Jane? Sorry, Jane, I think you're still muted.
You're on mute.
Yeah.
So if you've test run this with other people other than us, and you've got data, I think there's too much information on more in that last block, the 12 council members, 3 per district will be elected, and then you describe how it works. I would not put, if no winner is determined in around the candidate, I would eliminate that. And I would just put for more information on ranked choice, or whatever the word is, how you count, click here or go to there. Because that's what we've been saying in our sort of high level presentations, is just very, very simple. But if you're a geek and you want to know, well, what if, and what if, and what if, then I would put it on there, because it was all making great sense to me. And then when I got to that last block, I thought, oh, this is really more complicated than I thought it was. And the whole point is to show that it's easy, right? So I felt that it wasn't easy after I read that last block. But I think it needs testing with a whole bunch of people. I mean, I would test it with us, but with other people, pull in a group of people, just your own city members, just, pull a few out of the lunch line and see what they see. Anyway, just a thought.
Yeah, thank you for that. To clarify, we have not tested with a bunch of people yet. You are really the first ones to see it. So we will, though. It'll go through all of our partners in our city, and we'll get lots of eyes on it. But yeah, I think that's a great point, that we may be straying from bite into snack or snack into meal or whatever here, and they're just maybe too much for one postcard worth of information. So I think that's a great point, something we'll keep in mind as we take a look at it. Thanks.
James, if I may, I
Yeah.
defer to other hands, but I don't see others right now. So with regard to James' observation, I recall, I think on the city website, there's a nice little diagram, sort of a flow chart that sort of just depicts what's written. I welcome feedback, or it depends. Yeah, I mean, I personally like diagrams because you can study it and it's visual, but maybe that would be more confusing. But I just phrase that as an option. If one had a diagram and then had for more information, go to the website.
I think that's a really interesting thought. Keeping in mind that this looks much larger on your screen, unless you're attending this meeting on your phone, I guess, than it will on an 11:16 card, or 11:6 card, excuse me. So I worry that a flow chart you might have trouble reading it unless it's like one or two boxes. But I do think that that's something that could potentially, the ballot insert has the potential to be a larger document, and we'll have less of this other information. So that may be a great thing to put on the ballot insert, because there won't be other information about tabulation, and that may be a simple way to show like what's happening with tabulation. But we can talk about it too, though, putting it on this document. So yeah, thanks. Jose?
Yes. Do we have enough data to be mailing this in the correct language for the household, or are they just all going out in English?
We do not have enough data right now or enough money to determine.
I figured that.
So yeah, there's two ways that you can mail something with P&D, and you can do sort of an address by address, and we would then be able to say this version will go to these addresses, this version will go to this address. The much cheaper way, and sort of what we found we could afford, which this is still going to come in at about $110,000. So it's not cheap, but it's the cheaper way, is to just give a stack of them to the post office, and they just give it to every house on a route. And it's otherwise it costs a lot more to kind of fine tune what we deliver where.
I figured that. I just wanted to ask before I gave my suggestion, and my suggestion is to add a line somewhere on this that says a line in Spanish or in other languages says, do you need Spanish? Go here. Or, maybe in 2 or 3 languages where it tells people where to go if they want to get this information in another language.
I really like that idea. I think that's we have a lot of Spanish speakers. It's the top of our list of second languages. So I think looking into something like that might be a great idea.
Yeah, and a good idea for like putting it in beside it. If you were to pull up the QR code, that takes you to the RCV page, and those pages are now translated. So just making sure that it sort of points people like, here's where you can see it, and it automatically takes them there.
Great. Fred?
Yeah, I know.
I just want to make sure I don't want to take up monopolies the entire time. You guys have lots of time to look at this, so I want to make sure my colleagues have a chance to.
This may be the segue to the next topic, which is the targeted voter outreach education. But if this were translated and then given to the different groups that are targeting, that have gotten awards, I mean, I know that there must be very similar information materials being translated into those different languages for the targeted groups. And so they had multiple copies, that this was available at tabling community events where there were persons for whom English is not their primary language. There's enough information here, and it's simple enough once you get through with our comments and everyone else's and simplify it even further, that it would be perfectly useful in a translated form. You just don't have to, you can't afford to target mail it because you've shortchanged your broad education budget. So let's use the other way to take this information and impart it.
And that is this particular mailer probably will not serve that purpose, but there is the almost all the information from this came from the fact sheet that you have already seen. That is going to be is already translated and will be translated, and our contractor has an additional duty. All the content that they produce, they translate into 5 languages beyond English. So it'll exist in 6 languages total. And those will go directly to the grantees for specific, targeted audiences, and make sure that we get a wide reach on that too. So yeah, but it's a great point. Great. All right. Like I said, you'll all have this in your follow-up and get to send. We'll kind of collect all of the feedback and responses, and then we'll put it in a format that the designer, Ryan over, I think, Water Bureau, can sort of receive it all from like one location. So we'll collect it all, and there'll be more details about how to do that and what we're looking for and deadlines and things in the follow-up. But I really appreciate you all. I'm going to stop sharing, and then I believe I am passing it off to Francisca to talk to you about the ads that we ran during June.
Yeah, and then I think I need the next slide. Okay, so for our ad placements in June, we had 13 digital and print news publications. So like Jane, she saw the one in the Oregonian. We had some in the Southeast Examiner, Northeast Examiner. But we also had online. We also had ads through iHeartRadio, OPB, and Spotify. I also know that there was some questions about the Hearts and Minds ad campaign. So I put in a screenshot of sort of what they have. Their ads will be coming in later, and they will have more multilingual ones. So you can see that they're going to have some English and Spanish ones. And their social media ones will be in English, Spanish, Russian, Vietnamese, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese. Yeah, our next set of ads are going to start in July, and then we'll have some more in September. Yes. Yeah. Just looking over my ad plan. I don't know if you have any specific questions. I think we mostly wanted to see what you were seeing. I also have some data on how our ads are performing. So in each of the ads, I added in like a custom link. So whenever people used a QR code or they clicked on it, it would tell us where we were getting the most like attention from. And we found that when certain publications like the Portland Mercury included us in a very targeted like newsletter, people clicked more through that. We also had a lot of success from, I think the examiners were really well received. Portland Mercury, KPTV, and Bike Portland, I think, were our top 4 ads. Yeah. Any questions? Anything in particular that you're curious to hear more about? I feel like I have a lot of data, but I don't want to just give you data. I want to tell you more about what you're interested in.
Can I go?
Yes, this can provide some good feedback, Francisca. So yes, Juanita.
Thank you. I was waiting. Okay. Yes. First of all, thank you so much for the information that you sent us. That was very, it was very informative. But when I was reading the Hearts and Minds breakdown and cost, I was wondering, they're going to be doing creative development and community-based organization work sessions. How many number of sessions are they doing, and what kind of organizations are they targeting to do that? I was curious about it, that piece.
Let me double check. I have their sort of like breakdown of what they have. I don't know specifically how many sessions, but they do work that they basically showed us part of their campaign ideas for the materials that they're going to be making for the community organizations that won the grant. So it was those 11 organizations that won.
Okay.
So yeah, it's for them. I don't
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
That
if
answers
Okay.
my question. Yeah. Just out of curiosity, as I was reading the minutes for the for approval that we just went through, I was wondering, there was a lot of feedback regarding the comic that was going to be used as an educational tool. And it was a significant number of recommendations. Do you know if that comic has already been printed and if those recommendations were incorporated?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
comic was printed. Let me share with you the page where all of the comic, like everything that we've made so far, where you could look at it. And I think we incorporated a lot of this group's feedback.
Oh, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. For example, I remember someone mentioned like we should do the 6 instead of 5, or we should better explain how the votes get transferred over. So yeah, here I just put in a link to all of the printed materials that there are. And so
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Juanita, and thank you,
You're welcome.
Francisca, and James. Oh, so if we have no further questions, let's go to the next slide and a related but different subject. Hard to reach voter contract. And at our last meeting, we received, a lot of us asked questions about, the hard to reach voter contracts and, the grants and sub-grantees, and, how to and we were interested in review of the budget, contract of the budget, for hard to reach voter outreach efforts. So Jennifer has some information for us. So Jennifer, may I turn the mic over to you?
Well, actually.
okay.
Oh, great. We hear a little bit of an echo, Jennifer. So
Hold on. Okay.
Okay, just and then just use this. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me? Okay.
yes.
Okay,
It's better.
Great. Thanks, William. So wanted to share just a few highlights from our hard to reach voter contract. As you're aware, this is a contract that we have with Portland United for Change. United Way is the fiscal sponsor. And one key part of this contract is the grantee program. And at our last meeting, we had not yet quite finalized and announced the grantee organizations. And so we're really excited to just now share that these 11 organizations have been selected through the grantee process. And they were notified late May, began onboarding first week of June. And right now they have begun work and will be continuing to do outreach and voter education work in their communities throughout the summer leading up to the election. So there are a total of 11 grantees. There are 3 main categories of grant funding. And so the first is direct voter education, and those were amounts of $40,000 grant awards. That's the 3 organizations are listed there. And then also we have community education grants, which were kind of the mid-range $15,000 grant amounts. And then there were 3 organizations selected for communications grants, $5,000. So yeah, we're just really delighted to be working in partnership with these organizations. And they have gone through onboarding and kind of a briefing in the last week with Ranked Vote, the mock election platform. So each of them will be using that tool, and they have individual licenses so that they can set up mock elections and incorporate that as part of their outreach activities. And then, that will just be, as the work gets underway, we'll be able to provide, updates on kind of the number of events and people that they're reaching, and also just feedback they're hearing from community. So next slide, please. The other part of the contract is the sub-partner contract, Hearts and Minds, which is our media partner in the contract. And so a question that was asked at the last meeting was what their budget, which is $300,000, what that was going towards. So we have here we shared previously in email, and then this is reflected on the slide here, which is the different budget items and kind of description of where those funds are going. So kind of if we were to just lump it into two main buckets, the first is around media and materials, and that is kind of laid out with all those descriptions and items. So that's a total of $145,000, and then there's staffing for the design and creative team. That's $155,000 of the total budget. So that totals the $300,000. And so they have a variety of strategies they're using to reach as broad of a base of communities, focusing on hard to reach voters and communities. And so they some of the areas that they're using are radio, paid search ads, digital display, and then also paid media, social media. And then there is some printing and work that they're doing. I think to Juanita's question earlier around the community community organization kind of sessions, is they're working closely with, or they will be working closely with our grantees to develop content and materials specific for the grantees' use and needs. And so there's a small portion of the budget that is related to printing of those materials. I think they've discussed talking points around that so that the grantees can use that in their conversations and presentations. And then also one example is a door hanger that has kind of very condensed information, right? A picture of the ballot. So something that can be left when community staff are going out and doing canvassing or door-to-door outreach or at other events. So that's some examples. The Hearts and Minds team is available to come at a future meeting. I think we discussed July 31st is our next, this subcommittee's next meeting. So they are available. I think we're waiting on confirmation around the time and who, but just wanted to let you know that they are available if that's of interest for them to come and share more information about their specific campaign. So I think one other thing that I wanted to share before seeing if there are questions or comments, we did want to share some findings from 2 community focus groups that were done way back at the beginning of the year. So this is part of, there were some funds available for the voter education budget. And so we just kind of organized these, or we worked with a firm, FM3 Research, to hold 2 focus groups, and they were focused on individuals who were described as kind of like lower likely to vote individuals, but and also from districts 1 and 2. And so these 2 groups were conducted. There was a series of questions and information that was shared at the focus groups, really focused on Portland elections and the changes to the form of government. And some of the key findings I wanted to just kind of reflect back was that the participants found that a shift to geographic districts was very appealing, right? That resonated well with them, and there was excitement around that. Very few of the participants were familiar with how the current commission form of government works, I think that's probably not surprising, right, to us. And so kind of describing that it's changing, that was just something that a finding that was shared. Voters and also the participants, one finding was that with some clear instructions, the participants understood the ranked choice ballot. There was a sample ballot kind of shared, and that they understood both the ballot and the kind of the exercise and point of ranking candidates in preference, and it didn't appear to be really intimidating or overly confusing. So those are just some of the key findings from those focus groups. And again, this was conducted back in February. So we just got the report recently, so wanted to share back some of those reflections. So. And I'll pause there for questions or thoughts. Yes, Fred.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was very useful information, and I love the idea of the feedback from the focus groups. Gives us some better sense. It's comforting to realize people aren't as confused as some of the people we've been talking to out in the group presentations. But I didn't understand. I mean, maybe I just didn't pick up on it in any previous presentations. In the targeted targeted information, there's community outreach. Some groups got money for community outreach and some got money for communications, and I didn't quite understand the difference. What is there's some nuance there that I'm not grasping. And then with Hearts and Minds and their media budget, the screen we have up in front of us now, is any of that material translated? A, and then B, the digital display, online banner ads, as far as I understand, banner ads, they run across, the screen. And so is there some way to then link or a QR code there so that people can then get further information from the banner ads? And then again, how are any of these targeted for the communities that are historically unrepresented in City Hall decision-making?
Yeah. So I'll start with the question about the grant, different types of grants. So it's really based on, it is the grant program and the RFP process laid out 3 main types of grant opportunities. And so there were different types of activities and kind of scale in reach that are reflected in these 3 different areas. There is overlap, right? So for example, like the host town halls, I think both the first direct voter ed and the community ed, that is an eligible activity, but ones that were in the direct voter education, proposed kind of more, maybe more scale of reach, maybe more different communities to be reached. And then the communications one was also more limited in the type of kind of activities in which they would be using the funds for. So I think it was both described as distinct categories and funding amounts available, and there's overlap of some of the eligible activities, frankly, across all of those areas. Just in looking at the total amount of available funds in the grant, I think that was how it was structured. So we knew relatively the amount of partners and grantees we wanted to be able to partner with and select, through this opportunity. And just moving to your question around the Hearts and Minds budget, yes, their outreach and materials or their media is going to be available and translated in 5 different languages. The targeting around communities and the approaches they're using, they would be able to talk a lot more specifically and eloquently about. My understanding is the banner ads, yes, they would be translated, but also that there's some way in which when they purchase and target those ads, they're being targeted to users, and it like somehow based on kind of community and potential language and linguistic through like some type of search and I don't know, analytics or something. James may be able to describe it as well a little more, or Francisca.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, just to jump in, it's part of it is they're still working out exactly the strategies to target, but one that is they're definitely using zip codes. So we'll look at zip codes, and we have demographic information based on zip codes from government surveys, and from voter turnout information. So we can do, if you do a digital ad, you could do it for just a single zip code within Portland. And then that, it's not perfect. Obviously, not every zip code is not a monolithic community, but it will help to sort of target it a little bit more. And that's one example, just so you can get an idea of the type of targeting they'll be doing.
Thank you for, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, James.
Just thank you, James.
I just wanted to add, Francisca had mentioned earlier, we have specific kind of links to translated web pages of on our voter ed materials and resources. And so we are coordinating with Hearts and Minds to make sure they're utilizing, like in the ones that are in different languages, they're connecting and using the corresponding like QR code and website. So it directs people directly there.
Good. That's good information to know that there's synthesis between all the different folks involved. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Jane, your hand's raised, and please.
Thank you, Bill. First of all, I just want to congratulate the team, Jennifer, Francisca, Katie, for this great work. I'm really impressed with the grantees. I think these are first-rate organizations, and it's wonderful. And I'm very excited that on July the 31st, we get to hear from Hearts and Minds, because I think that they are probably a really interesting group, and they will come and share some examples of the kind of stuff that they're doing, and we'll get really excited. Who manages the grantees now? Now they've been awarded the grants and they're going to go trundling off and do their fabulous work. Who exactly manages, reviews the work that they've done and just make sure that they're spending the money the way that they said it? Who's on that team?
Right, so that is currently Grace Ramsey. I mean, you're familiar with Grace.
Oh, yes, great. Grace.
So Grace is serving kind of dual role on the contract. She is the lead on the voter education and ranked choice voting education portion of the contract, and she's also stepped in as interim coalition director, right? Previously vacated by the Samantha. Sorry. So in her role as the interim coalition director, she's overseeing the grant program and working with all of these grantees.
So I'm just going to toss something out here for later meetings, maybe for Grace, that as this work gets underway, that Grace or someone comes and Grace sees something, she goes, God, that's really interesting. That was a fabulous piece of work. And come and share something that the Urban League's doing, or Apano, or the Latin Network, or the YWCA. Just some cool little tidbit so that we can get as excited as you lot. That would be really, I think that would be very interesting for us. This is a chunk of money and a chunk of talent, and it would be lovely to hear some feedback about how it's going. Just an idea. Thank you. I'll now shut up.
It's a great idea. And Grace is the other person we're trying to confirm for the 31st for exactly that reason. But she actually is going to be in town, but she's going to be at the county working with the county election. So we're trying to coordinate on her schedule, but definitely noted. Yes.
Yeah, or later, or, just whenever she's got a moment. That would be great. Thank you again, Jennifer. Nice work.
Yes, thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for all the questions and contributions. And I think we'll look forward to talking more with you, Jennifer, and with Hearts and Minds. So thank you. We'll move now to our next subject, which is candidate education. And now is the time where we'd like to debrief on the candidate education events that took place in the spring, and then consider a fall event. James has some information to provide, an overview, so thank you in advance again, James, and then we can have some discussion. So James, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. So I first just want to go over a little bit of some information debriefing on the sessions that happened, and then we can stop there, get some feedback from you, and then talk about this other potential future events or future candidate education opportunities. So the spring sessions happened. We ended up doing 3 events. We had a virtual event and 2 in-person events. The virtual event, the recording was shared with you previously, and it is available now to people to go back and watch. It's not all that dissimilar from our January session, although it is updated information. You know, we didn't have ranked vote ready back in January, so this incorporates ranked vote, which I think is an incredible tool to talk about RCV. It makes it much clearer to a lot of people. So things like that are a little bit different. So we're using that video now for candidates as opposed to the previous ones. One thing that we did note was, we had great attendance in the January sessions. And so for that reason, we wanted to do some more sessions, and we originally even talked about doing 4 sessions. As we got a little closer, we moved that down to 3, and we realized we probably should have gone to 2. We did 2 in January. We probably should have done 2 again in spring. We didn't really get the attendance to sort of constitute having a 3rd one. But we also started to feel candidates are a finite group. Even this year in Portland, there's only so many candidates. It feels like there's a million, but there really is only so many. So we probably kind of saturated our audience. But that said, we sort of at the end, we're trying to push even candidate adjacent people that were just wanted that really deep dive into how the election was working, because our final session is it's 2.5 hours of training, and then an hour of like tabling and lunch and stuff. So it's a lot more in depth than what we do at other sessions. So moving forward in the future, we'll probably rethink. We've never done this before. We'll probably rethink and kind of do something a little bit different and do less of these, but we're done with this level of depth for the year. The second thing is we don't have a final list of candidates. As you know, August 27th is the final day to file. That's when we'll have our official list of candidates that are going to be on the ballot. But we're kind of estimating based on who is announced and who has already filed and then we have our list of people who attended an event either in January or in spring. And we think we hit somewhere between 40 and 60% of candidates attended one of our trainings. So we're very happy with that number. We're expecting 80-ish candidates, maybe a little bit more. And we had more than that attending the events, but not everybody was a candidate that attended. So we think we're probably going to end up somewhere around 40 to 60%. You're never going to hit 100 because there's just some number of candidates that if they're not interested in that type of training, or they already, they've been in the system for a long time and they just don't feel like they need it. But I'd be very happy with 60%. And even if we end up on our lower end of our estimate, 40% is still a number to be okay with. Following that, we sent up the follow-up material, went out to everybody, the recording, the slides, a bunch of our material and contact information. As you know, a big part of this event is it's all of the jurisdictions that a Portland candidate would interact with. We're in one room together. So we collected material from Secretary of State and from the counties and from SDE and from small donor elections, and from anybody who might interact with a candidate that is a government entity all contributed to this. So they got kind of a big packet afterwards to follow up with lots of information. It may be overwhelming, but if you're a candidate, you have a lot of information to go over. So and then we also included in that a survey, which we're still receiving results from and we're processing. So we may have some information follow up with you on that, but it's sort of just how did candidates feel about it? What did they think worked and didn't work? So we can improve it next time, and sort of any outstanding questions that they really didn't feel got answered. As you were aware, the biggest connection to this group in this was that this was meant to be a tool to hopefully the candidates, we expect them to talk about RCV in the districts to their voters, and we wanted them to be as educated on those tools as possible to sort of, it was kind of a train the trainer in a way. And we think that that portion went really well. We had probably more questions about that than anything except for maybe small donor elections. People have a lot of questions about that program as well. But second on the list of bulk of questions was about ranked choice voting and tabulation and filling out your ballot. So we definitely feel that the candidates that attended are more knowledgeable than when they started. And we have already heard, I've been out there at events, at candidate forums and other things. Not every candidate is giving exactly accurate information. We all know that it's always going to be true, but I definitely have seen candidates that I know were in the training that I personally spoke with, that I've seen them sort of not just giving correct information, but giving the information in the way that we have given it to them. So, that's it. It's a small sample, and who knows how many candidates are really out there doing that, but we think the idea of it, at least the concept of it, has been somewhat successful, and we'd like to grow it. So I'll talk about our future event in a second, but I first want to just open up if there are questions about, closing out those events, or thoughts or feedback on sort of what we have done to this point, up to this point in candidate education. Great. Well, seeing none, then I want to also chat briefly about, we're done with candidate learning sessions. We're not going to do any more of those, but we did get to the end of the sessions and sort of feel, based on survey results, the questions we were answered, just what we can see happening out there in sort of the ecosystem. We feel like we need something a little bit more for candidates. And so we're looking at developing another event. It's very much still being planned, but I would love to have some input from you all. It would be something that is targeted specifically at candidates that are going to qualify, that are qualified to be on the ballot. So it would not happen until after August 27th. And we would do direct outreach, not to abroad to the city, but to specifically to those candidates that are going to be on the ballot. It would not be this in-depth everything you need to know. We probably wouldn't talk at all about campaign finance and things like that, because we're obviously in September. We're very far along. But we do still feel like there's an opportunity to involve candidates again in our program. Certainly an opportunity to hit more candidates and refresh them on the changes that are happening in the election, to make sure that they're kind of still giving the message as we sort of see it should be given. So with that in mind, I'd love to, if you have thoughts here, that's great. If you don't, you can always follow up with us. But my biggest question is, do all of you feel there are areas in candidate education, there are things that candidates need that we have not yet given them? If you feel there are gaps, there are areas of knowledge or resources that you think candidates are not getting, especially as it applies to something that they could pass on to benefit voters broadly. We'd love to hear about that. If you have ideas, obviously, like I said, we're still in the planning stages. So if you're like this, you should do an event like this, I would love to hear stuff like that. And beyond that, we'll know more at the July meeting about the specifics of this event. We'll have a better understanding, so we can follow up with that. But I'd love to hear your input before we get to that point. Fred?
Yes, thank you, James. Thank you. It'd be very interesting to get, once you've been through it yourself and analyze the survey results of what you learned from that. I'm thinking of candidates that are on the ballot, they're out campaigning in September and October, and balance go mid-October, that they understand, and so that their voters that they're hoping will vote for them understand how votes are tabulated in some simple way, that maybe they've got the handout that we've just looked at, the mailer, so they've got some companion material with them as they go out. I'm afraid that there's still candidates that are, sorry about the clock, that think that there's that they're going to get election results election night. And that's not the case. We know that. And it was some way to assuage their anticipation. Say, it's going to take a while, to figure out how we trade off all these different ranks and votes. And there's the supporters should know that. I know some candidates are strategizing. You know, you don't have to make me your number one. I can be your number two, because the other candidates won't all be ones either. And so I'll jump up at some point. That may be a little too abstract for average voter to grasp, but I think the candidates at least should inherently understand that as they're campaigning, and especially as they're panicking as it gets closer to election day. Thanks.
Yeah, appreciate that, Fred. We have talked about ways in which we're always hesitant to talk to any candidate about how you should campaign. We want to talk to them about how not to break rules, things like that. We always want to be careful. We don't ever want to be advising a candidate on how to win. That said, there has been some conversation about, we know that one of the sort of potential benefits, I think this is, of all the benefits we talked about with ranked choice voting, this benefit I think doesn't have as much data to back it up, but there is this potential benefit about people kind of working together and saying, we'll vote for either of us as one or two, and that creates elections and campaigning that is a little more civil. We know that that's true. We're not sure that we're the office to pass on that. But there may be potential ways to just present the data and let people sort of see for themselves if that impacts their strategy. But yeah, that's a good point. One thing I do want to clarify. Go ahead, Fred.
Well, I think if they understand how it works, they can decide how they want to use that information. You wouldn't be telling them, to phrase it any particular way. But as long as they comprehend that and they've got material that they can give their voters, so that their voters also. It's another way for broad outreach, I think, and education. Yeah. And if I'm a candidate and I'm passing out the material, it almost obligates me to explain it to the people I'm passing out the information to. So hopefully I will have learned it by then.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Okay.
One thing I do want to clarify, you're totally right that we won't know the final results of the election on the election night. We never know the final certified results of the election on election night. But there will be preliminary results election night for ranked choice voting. So there will be something. So we may need to work on candidates with the nuance in that language. How do you want to make sure your voters aren't expecting final results, but they also should know like where to go to see some sort of results, to see the preliminary, how many ballots have been counted and what does that give us based on this, partial ballot count. And so yeah, that's a great word, that there's some of those messages are a little more nuanced, and we got to work on that with candidates. Great. Thanks.
Thank you, Fred, and thank you, James. May I comment in terms of our allocation of time? We're running a little bit over on the subject, but we do have good questions. So I'm just raising that. So if we can try to be succinct. And then, James, I'm anticipating you'll welcome questions if we email, or comments if we email them to you, possibly through Julia. Not sure, but we can do that.
Always. I'm always happy for separate questions outside of this venue, and we can get back to you.
Good. Sounds good. So it's not the one and only. Jane, please.
Thank you. I want to speak in support of Fred's statement about making sure that candidates truly understand in a great detailed way of how voting and votes are counted. I think they really need to know that. So they need the full meal deal. And then two observations and thoughts that actually came from Ida B. Wells students. They talked about overpromising that candidates, and they wanted to know what candidates were going to be told who were going to run for the city about what they can promise. Because one student kind of like was talking about a park that was in his area that really needed some work. And he wanted to know whether or not the candidate that might be on the ballot for his district might be able to promise that that park would get fixed the way that he wanted. And then another student kind of like said, well, it sounds to me like for the first time, we're going to have candidates who are out in the community. And so will we hear from the candidates about how they're going to be out in the community? And so one thing that I just wanted to, for the city, for you folks to even think about is, do you encourage people not to say an awful lot, just to say, we don't know yet how this all shakes out? Or do we already have candidates who say, "Oh, I'm going to be holding a district meeting once a month, and I'm going to be doing it in local schools"? And do we have the money to do that? So I would think that if I was running for candidate, in order to be able to say I was fabulous, I need to be able to understand what the parameters are there. So maybe just a thought process about how you talk to that.
Yeah, that's great. I would never tell a candidate not to say they're fabulous. I think all candidates should tell everybody they're fabulous. But we don't tell people like I don't care if a candidate over promises, under promises. That's on them. Do what campaign the way you want. We do have an integrated part of our candidate education. This is something that Tate spends a lot of time doing, Tate-wide on transition team, is how you will interact with the public. And there are some plans that are in place. There are some things that have just been part of a conversation that aren't finalized. And there are some things that are really going to be for the new council to decide. So we sort of go over that, and that's part of the conversation. But it's not a really deep part. So it could be something that we look on doing more on in whatever this future event is. So appreciate that.
Thank you, Jane, and thank you, James. Fred, did you have an additional question, or is your hand remaining from? Oh, I see.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
No problem. You disappeared. And Terry, I noticed you had your hand up. I mean, if it's succinct, we'd be pleased to hear you.
I just put it in the chat. I think some candidates are misunderstanding strategies and could use a more thoughtful discussion with thoughtful RCV people. But I don't know who that is, and I'm not sure James or city staff are the right people. And I don't know. One thing that does occur to me, since now I can talk, that the flow chart at the RCViz where the votes get allocated, I think is really helpful. And I think we talked last time about where people could trace where their ballot ended up. I think would also be helpful for people to understand strategy better. But that's all.
Thank you, Terry. And Jane, I've cut into some time on the next subject, which you're leading on GTAC's role in presentations and tabling. So if you'd like me to address the slide, I can, Jane, but I'm all open to you.
Go for it, Bill. You're on a roll.
Okay. We'll give it a try. But, at our last meeting, we talked about, our participation in presenting and tabling events with regard to ranked choice voting this summer. So we want to just review the opportunities we have for doing so and encourage ourselves to sign in as our summer activities permit. And Katie, I think you have an overview of opportunities for us that you can share. So you've got a slide here. So Katie, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so we have clearly just so much amazing work happening on the voter education front from all that we've heard. And we have a few more kind of avenues that we are showing up in community to start and ground ourselves how we're kind of hoping to measure our success is by the reach that we have with our voter education and how many folks we can talk to about RCV and show a sample ballot and do a mock election with, and then also comprehension. Are people walking away really understanding it? And so in addition to all of these things that we've heard from our grantees and our paid media and candidate learning sessions, we also have our tabling and town hall opportunities coming up this summer and early fall. And so the transition team is tabling at 4 or 5 specific events. We just had our first at Juneteenth, and then we'll have our next one at the Pickles game next week. And we're busy over here getting ready for Pride and Jade Market and some summer free-for-alls. We're also coordinating with the county. We're doing 3 shared tabling events with them. And then they also have many additional tabling opportunities. And the auditor's office is also coordinating on some of these existing opportunities, but they're also ramping up their own tabling efforts as well, as they've had low petitions. And so we're finding that they have some more capacity to add. James could speak to this, but I think 5 to 10 tabling events this summer. So it's really great additional numbers. We also have 2 fantastic voter education interns who are listening into the call now, who are bringing a lot of ideas and capacity. And so that's kind of the existing landscape. Oh, we also have the town halls in September and October, where we'll have 2 virtual city employee town halls on ranked choice voting, and then we'll have 4 community events, 2 in person and 2 virtual in September and October. And then there are the existing community presentations. There are 11 briefings between June and October. And those are the ones that June is in contact with all of you to schedule. So on top of those avenues to have tabling and presentations, we sent out a survey. I think Julia sent out a survey 3 weeks ago or so, kind of laying out the existing summer engagement efforts of GTAC. And we asked who was interested, on top of the community presentations and ongoing committee and subcommittee meetings, was interested in doing additional tabling efforts. And so 8 of y'all said yes. And so we have sent a follow-up survey and have identified quite a variety of our summer free-for-all events that the city is putting on. And so we're partnering with 311 Outreach and again with the county, and are signing up the 8 of y'all who volunteered for 8 additional tabling opportunities between July and August. That survey, for the few folks who have yet to fill it out, we're hoping to get your responses by Monday, end of day. So if you all could send that over. And what an amazing way to add 8 additional opportunities that we wouldn't have been able to have the staff capacity to show up. So if other folks are kind of feeling out their summer schedule, thinking they could are interested in helping table at some of these summer free-for-all events, let us know, and we can send you the survey and see if any of the events that we're in coordination with work for your schedule. And then the last opportunity and role is going to be helping us form and think about the town halls in September and October. And so that, we will come to the July 31st GTAC meeting with an overview of our current plan and ask for some feedback and think about that in more detail. Those are a little bit farther in the fall and summer, so we have just a little bit more time to think about that. So, yeah, let me know if you have questions or comments, and mine was short, so it's good that the other ones, you all had your time for those.
Thank you, Katie. Do we have any observations or comments or? Yes, Fred?
Always the first out of the
Please.
out of the gate here. I got from the Portland Tribune a whole list of all the summer activities that are out there. This was in mid-June, and there's more than a dozen street fairs, and I guess going back to that, because when I go to a street fair, I usually see a booth by the county health department or PBOT or somebody, or the neighborhood association in that local, say, Multnomah Village. And they've got information for citizens, for the residents there who are attending the street fair. And there really aren't any street fairs in this in the what you've got to date here. And so I was just wondering, like, they're huge. I mean, they're just the attendance is gigantic at these things. And it seems like a great way to expose people that otherwise, other than the mailer they're going to get from the city auditor's office, if they don't attend neighborhood association meetings where there's been presentations, they're not targeted specifically by any of the targeted community outreach efforts. It seems like just a great way to get a general sense by brought more voters of this change is coming. You may not be aware of it. The people I talk to that are maybe politically active, but different demographics, they don't think that Portlanders still grasp what change is coming, even the charter changes, let alone ranked choice voting. And so I just think that street fairs, when people are out and about, or maybe even a table in Pioneer Square that's staffed by GTAC volunteers or city or county employees, for the concerts. I think that when they have concerts at Pioneer Square on Friday noons, that would be useful. I think we need to be a little more thorough about or comprehensive about who we're reaching out to. If your interns got some great ideas, I bet you they do. Go with them. Thanks.
Thanks
Thank
for that
you.
great.
Well, please go ahead, Katie.
Thanks for that great suggestion and shout out. Street fairs are absolutely one we should be looking at. And I think some of the ones that our interns are looking at right now and hoping to have the auditor's office show up at those. And I really forgot one of my talking points, which is such a huge body of work that Francisca has been leading, which is coordinating with all the different places that's the city is showing up, whether it's We Are Here, We Are Better Together, or our parks or water, and doing additional train the trainer events and providing them materials and getting them prepared to show up at all of their community engagement events this summer as well, to be able to speak on behalf of us. And so she is really doing so much to amplify our reach at areas that we already are at, and providing them with all the resources. So I am tracking, and so is she, the areas that while we are not physically there, our materials are being presented. So I think that can also, we can bring that back to the committee. Yeah.
Great news. Thank you.
James.
Yes, thank you, Katie. James.
I just, Fred, I think you were inside my brain a little bit. I just
Sorry.
absolutely no, it's great. I love it. That is exactly the avenue that we're looking at. That is exactly why the auditor's office is looking at adding in some events, because we absolutely know there's lots of events and we have some more capacity, largely because of, as Katie mentioned, we have two of the best interns that have ever existed. Sophie and Yusuf are two new interns that started at the beginning of this month, and they are compiling a list right now for us of all of events, and then we will do what we can to add our participation in those events where it makes sense. So absolutely we'll add to this list and expect more. And then I think we may even look to have our interns present to you in July at the July meeting to not only talk about sort of what they've been helping with, but they are also each doing an independent project that is a unique activity that is adding something entirely separate to our ecosystem of voter education. So I think they're amazing, and I want to get them in front of you so that you can learn directly from them the work that they're doing. But yeah, we're street fairs have been talked about and are on the list. Music festivals, all sorts of things that we were worried we didn't have the capacity to get to. We're adding them in now. We're definitely going to hit a lot more than what's on this list. So great, great for asking.
Yeah, make sure that you again survey GTAC members to see if you've got some of us that volunteer for any of those. Because I like standing next to a city employee that knows what they're talking about, and maybe grabbing more folks that's there, looking through the material and explaining, how they can learn more and what's coming down the pike November 5th. Thanks.
Yeah, good discussion. And I'll need to conclude. Katie, I think I heard, possibly incorrectly, that you said if if you haven't filled out the survey and want to ask, and you'll send it to the person, but maybe for ease, just send it to the whole subcommittee or the whole GTAC. And then when it, then we have it again, and those who have filled it out know they don't need to do it a second time, but it would be available. And I see Julia is on it.
On it.
Excellent. Okay, thank you again, Katie, and thank you again. Good questions and discussions. Our next slide, if we go to the next slide, addresses new feedback, from the community. So here we allow a little time for if one has had a new session with in which one's presented ranked choice voting. Here's a good time. We welcome your reflections, observations. So would anyone like to raise some? And Fred, I do see your hand out. That is really out of the gate, but it might be left over from last time.
Well, it's just happy to, it's just that to make sure I'm out of the gate first on this one.
All right, you're out of the gate. Go.
James and I made a presentation to the Meriwether retirement community down on the South Waterfront area last week. And it was the first time I had heard this total confusion. It was just one out of, and there were only 20 people or less attending, but this one woman was totally high-centered on that she was going to vote for 3 candidates in her district 4. And James kept trying to explain it to her. I would try to simplify it. And I don't know, I just never thought that anyone could be that confused. But then I saw a message from June that there was apparently this is a broader lack of understanding than I was aware of. People think, no, you have one ballot, you get to vote once for a city in this, you get to vote for city councilor once, but you get to rank up to 6 candidates by preference, rank them by preference. You don't have to do all 6, but where they get the 3 are ultimately going to be elected, but you don't pick 3. You can rank them. It's just some kind of confusion about 3 councilors are being elected, and the voter thinks that somehow they have to limit themselves to 3, or what? Is anyone else getting that? And James, does that really accurately summarize the woman's confusion?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a lot of back and forth there. So, and it's hard when someone is confused. Sometimes the difficulty is in us trying to understand what their real confusion is.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's a reoccurring theme. It's something that I think we've even addressed in a previous meeting here. It's something that we're adding into the FAQ, and we're trying to add into our material. That people single winner, no problem, but in the multi-winner in districts, because there are 3 seats, people seem they either believe that whatever they do, even if they fill out the ballot the way we want them to fill out, somehow that will equate to 3 votes. Or they think that they're supposed to rank like 3 candidates separately. So they'll give 3 candidates number 1, 3 candidates number 2, So it does seem that is a point of, if there's confusion, that pops up more often than not. And it's definitely something we've identified and want to add in to the FAQ and other areas to sort of positively. One thing I will say about that session is I do think that one thing I identified that I think was a problem with the way I spoke about it at that particular session. And if you're going to do the sort of meal size presentation, I don't think you should start in the middle with an explanation of tabulation. And so part of it is we did this overview, and then we got a tabulation question, and then we tried to answer that question without, I think people in my experience understand it far better if you walk through a round by round and let them see from beginning to end, and then take questions and do the specifics. Otherwise, you're like working backwards, and they don't have all the pieces. And I think that's a bit of what happened at that presentation.
And I also, James, I remember you saying, maybe aside to me, maybe afterwards, that on the presentation, the slide deck, there was a slide that showed, the tabulation sort of thing, where votes get moved around, arrows pointing to from, you know, the least voted for candidate being dropped off on round 2, et cetera, and then their votes going up. And it was very simple graphic, but it's not in the slide deck. And that probably explains single transferable voting, STV, more simply and clearly than anything I could say.
Well, and what I'll say, I've had conversation with June about this, and I encourage June to jump in, but I think there has to be 2 approaches. One is, if you're going to do a snack size presentation and you get those heavy tabulation questions, I think you should push people to follow up separately.
Right.
I think if you're doing the snack size and you get derailed, and so it can be hard to separate those things. And so either I think you need to do the full presentation from the beginning to end, or you need to do the simplified, which is great. I think simplified serves its purpose, but then you need to say, like, this is really deeper than in this moment. Let me redirect you to some resources that you can, because starting in the middle, I just think is it's the worst of both sides. You know, it doesn't, you're
Right.
like halfway between a meal and a snack, and it doesn't work out very well. But
Okay, thanks.
And I think I just want to add a little bit to that, just as a course correction, is that original request was for more transition focus. But I've noticed that if we have over, 30 minutes with a group, 30 to, so if we have more 45 to an hour with a group, they're going to want to talk about tabulation. So now, just as a standard, we'll be ready to have someone there if they're longer presentations, since the interest has been there. So appreciate you doing that one, Fred, and kind of James, and kind of giving us that learning so that we can kind of do better moving forward.
Good.
Good question, and good feedback. And for if one has the snack presentation, to refer the person or ask for a separate conversation so one can keep going. So thank you. We'll move to upcoming meetings, which is the next slide. And as this slide will point out, this meeting is recorded and it'll be posted on the committee's website. And here are upcoming meetings. We have a virtual community listening session. This is on July 18. If a recently concluded listening session, it was very good to hear a nice summary and explanation of our GTAC recommendations. And then there are breakout sessions to hear solicit and hear feedback from the public, or from residents who participate. So real informative, and that'll be on, and we can help out too. So that's on July 18. Another meeting, our subcommittee for the budget and districts and council operations, is on July 30. And our next voter and candidate education and outreach meeting will be July 31. But prior to then, please, additional questions, please ask James, or you can express them to the whole committee. Julia, James will see them, and along with Jennifer and Katie and June. So thank you all for being here. So I think that concludes the summary of upcoming meetings. And we have a last but not least slide, which is we'll adjourn the meeting unless someone wants to say something additional for the good of the order or the dynamics.
I just thank you so much, Bill. I'd just like to thank James and Francisca and Jennifer and Katie for there's a tremendous amount of staff work here.
Yes.
I mean, they have been working like Trojan horses, and the work is really stellar. And I just encourage them to try and take a little breather and enjoy the 4th of July. Really nice work, and it's a pleasure to watch you in action. Thank you. Thank you so much.
And if we can do things to make your jobs easier, let us know.
Let us know. Please let us know.
Yes.
Okay.
So thank you, everyone.